Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, so like I was saying, we're going to break these two into depth, right? We want to understand them now because there are certain things that we didn't use, right? So we're kind of restricted because we had a specific site that we wanted to build, right? So there are certain things that we're not adding to the site. Okay, so for example, what example can I give, right? We never changed the background color. I don't know if you guys noticed, we never changed the background color because the default background color for Google is white, right? And whenever you are designing a website or building a website using HTML, the default is also white, so you never played around with the background colors and everything, right? Now that's on CSS, okay? But then in HTML, in these series, right? So we're just calling it, okay? So dive into it from scratch, like I'll explain everything, what HTML is, how it's used and everything. Then we look at some of its basics. If you see me looking, the screen are enabled. Okay, let's get started. Okay, let's get started. All right, so is right. Okay, we need to understand what HTML is. So here I have Figma. This is Figma. This is just a design tool that you use. So if you're into it, okay, I just use it to design and everything. But in this video, I'm just using it to kind of illustrate certain things like draw here, right? So that's what I'm doing. Okay, so what we are now looking at is HTML. Okay, we're looking at HTML. Let me increase the font. Okay, there. So we're looking at HTML. Okay, now we understand, we've been learning, we've learned a lot about HTML. I'm sure some people now understand what HTML is, okay? But I'll just maybe kind of repeat what it means, okay? So the HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, okay? It's a markup language. It helps us build a structure for our website, okay? So like the example that I gave last time, whenever someone maybe wants to explain these technologies, the example that a lot of people like using, and I do as well, is comparing HTML, CSS, JavaScript with a human being, right? So the HTML is kind of the skeleton of a human being, okay? Then the CSS is like the covering, the tissues, the organs and all those things, right? That kind of beautifies the skeleton. Then the JavaScript now, that's like the action, the response, the events that gets to happen. So if we compare it to a human being, that's now like the actions that someone is able to participate in. So speaking, moving your hand and things like that, right? That's the use of JavaScript, okay? So since we are focusing on HTML today, HTML just helps us build a structure for our website, okay? So that's the main purpose of HTML. So you have to keep that in mind every time you are using HTML. So now straight into the code, okay? We'll get to that, but for now I want you guys to really understand these things, okay? These are important items that I'm about to mention, so I want you guys to really pay attention and just focus on them, okay? They are really important. All right, so with HTML, okay, so with HTML there's what we call inline elements, okay? Inline elements and block elements, okay? Block elements. All right, so this is really important, as in these are the fundamentals, these are the basics that you need, okay? Because if you don't understand this, you find yourself in situations where certain things are not working the way that you expect them to, because maybe you missed out in terms of what these elements do or what they are, right? So I want us to really focus on this, okay? So in HTML you have basically two types of elements, okay? You have what we call an inline element and a block element, okay? Now what's the difference? Okay, let's look at that, okay? So imagine you have a screen, okay? Let's say this is your screen, okay? Let me change the color maybe to gray so that you're able to see it, okay? Maybe not too much, okay, there, right? So now imagine this is your screen, right? You're looking at your website on this screen, okay? This is your screen. right? It's starting from there and ending there, right? So this is your screen starting from there and ending there. Okay, now if this was a block element there, okay, let me do that and just copy, duplicate, right? So if this was a block element, okay, if this was a block element, it wouldn't just occupy the space that it needs. All right, now by space, what I mean is, if let's say we were to add an inline element, would only take up this much space, okay, but with a block element, it occupies the whole space. Okay, this is what it does, meaning that if we were an inline element, it would not fit, it would not sit next to the block element, it would go down and start like that, whether it's an inline element or a block element. Okay, so these two differences are really important. You need to understand these differences. Okay, if you guys have questions, or if you're stuck somewhere, just throw the questions in the comment section. I'll be able to answer them. Okay, yeah, so this is the difference between inline element and block element, right? Because there are times where you want certain things to sit next to each other, right? So for example, you might have images, like two images, right? So let's give an example of images. So let's say you have two images. This is an image, and you want the image to sit next to each other like this. Okay, so immediately you find that, okay, so immediately you find that your images are sitting next to each other like this. Just know that these images have been converted to block element, because now they're occupying the whole space. Okay, they're occupying the whole space that they need. All right, but by default, image elements are inline elements. So every time you're adding images, they'll always sit next to each other. All right, unless this image is too big in terms of it's extending to that point, then this other image will be pushed down here. Okay, yeah, so it's important that we understand these two sort of two block elements, and you want them to sit next to each other. Okay, so in that case, that's where now CSS, right, it converts a block element like this one, okay, into an inline element like that. Okay, that's what the block element, the display property does when you give it a value of flex. Okay, yeah, so I'm sure we get that. If we have any questions on that one, please do put up your questions in the comment section. Okay, yeah, now the other thing that we need to understand, okay, between these two is this. Now imagine in a situation where, okay, let me move this down here, okay, and just group this, okay, right, like that. So imagine in a situation where, okay, a situation where you have two inline elements, all right, you put them up, two inline elements, example, an image, right, you put them up, like you write code for those two inline elements. What will happen is, what will happen is that they'll sit next to each other like this. Okay, they'll push next, and then when you add another inline element, it will again push itself next to each other like this. Okay, now the moment you declare these inline elements as block element, what will happen is that block element, right, sometimes, which we'll get into when you start looking at CSS, sometimes you can declare one HTML element as an inline block element, meaning that it will have both properties of an inline and block element, and it will use one of these properties depending on the situation. Okay, okay, yeah, okay, 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 all right, maybe let me change the position of the Wi-Fi. Okay,